Hi, I'm Kai, and welcome to a double mod feature, because this time we have both Expanded Foliage Brushes 2.0 and a related Expanded Terrain Tools update. And we might as well cover the Expanded Terrain Tools update first, because it's a little bit smaller. For those that aren't aware, Expanded Terrain Tools let you build things faster than normal, as well as at a larger radius. Or a smaller radius. It expands your terrain tools, expands your possibilities with them. Gives you better control. And of course this applies to terrain sculpting as well, so you can sculpt way steeper hills. Same goes for lakes, by the way. And you can sculpt at a much bigger radius. And holding shift while sculpting does so way faster, so this is the normal speed. And now if I hold shift, and of course this works for foliage brushes as well, so normal speed, and then holding shift. And this is a lot more obvious with lower intensity, so this is the normal low intensity speed, and now holding shift. So now we're all caught up. Well, Expanded Terrain Tools just got a brand new feature, and this is specifically for Expanded Foliage Brushes. You see, this thing here, it's not quite hard-coded, but I can't add another one. There can only be one remove tool. Which means, as you use the Expanded Foliage Brushes, you need to scroll up every single time to get this again. Well, as of version 1.3 of Expanded Terrain Tools, every brush has a remove mode. If I hold down X, I'll start removing. See, this is me painting normally. And now while holding shift, and now, this is me painting while holding X. And now, Shift X. So you no longer need to use this tool to remove foliage. You can now hold X while painting with the current brush you have selected. So if you make a mistake, you can just hold X and remove. And this was added to Expanded Terrain Tools 1.3 specifically because Expanded Foliage Brushes 2.0 doesn't have an extra remove tool, so now we can remove with any brush you're using, which should hopefully alleviate the issue. And that's that. So now we can move on to all the new stuff I added to Expanded Foliage Brushes 2.0. Now this is just going to be a feature update. If you want to see everything that mod adds, check out this video. First of all, some new tropical brushes. You remember this brush here, the realistic jungle brush? It adds, well, a pretty realistic jungle. It has ferns, it has pretty bushy trees, and it had some different subtypes that can sort of lower in height inside. So you had this version, then you had the mango-less version, which removes the big bushy mango trees, then the low palm version, and then the open version, which was the lowest of them all. Well, I've since added a few sub-biomes to it. You start off with the regular open jungle, that's sort of the template. Then you have the fern grove biome, which basically adds this tropical fern grove, except inside the jungle, like so. Then you have the cordyline biome, which adds these little pretty plants in there, which I think look really quite nice in a tropical jungle. And finally, the mango grove, which just adds some palm trees and mango trees, along with some bushes. It's basically this mango grove, but inside the jungle, like so. And this biome also removes all of the ferns because they're not part of the normal mango grove brush. So hopefully with that you can use this jungle brush here and then still create variety inside using these sub-biomes. Next, as you saw there, we have two different fern groves, and this is true for both this and the temperate version. It's basically one fern grove which has grass in it, so that's these two here. They come with grass. And then two fern groves without grass. Next is something you might have seen already, and that is a brand new ground texture for forest that you can enable or disable. And it's this sort of brown forest floor texture. If I go into first person mode, it looks like this. Which I think is a lot more fitting for forests than the vanilla texture. And this of course stands out way better in a tropical biome, just because the contrast is a lot stronger. So this is sort of the regular floor, and this is the new forest floor. Keep in mind this does replace the vanilla forest floor you'd get, so it's an option in the config file. You can enable it or disable it. It's enabled by default. Next, due to popular demand, we have a whole new biome, the Redwoods biome. It's basically just 4 variants in a few different settings. So first of all, this first line here is the forest variety, whereas this is the shrub variety. If you remember from the last video, the forest variety comes with the forest brush, and it sort of builds up from shrubs into the forest, whereas the shrub variety doesn't build up at all. It's a bit more static, a bit more linear, but it doesn't come with the ground texture. So I've given you a choice of both. And the difference between the 4 variants is what kind of foliage they come with. First we have mixed foliage, which is mostly ferns, with some bushes and some sort of trees in the middle. If I paint a brush with this, because it just fills up a bit better, you can see it a little bit clearer. And this forest is of course a lot denser than the vanilla redwoods you get, which are these. And dropping in, I think it looks quite nice. And just to show you the forest variety, with the sort of brown floor, that looks like this. And these 4 here are then the sub-biomes of the same thing, just different alternatives. The first one here is the open variety, which is the same, just without any ground coverage, except for these little plants here and these sort of twigs there. The idea being that you can sort of lower the amount of foliage in some areas, whereas keeping others quite dense. So you can really customize how your redwoods look. Next we have the fern variety. Now it's the same as this, but lacking all the bushes. So if I place this down, and then paint over with ferns, you'll see the difference. See, it's removing little bushes. It's these sort of arrowwood bushes here. It's a minor change, but I thought I might as well include it. And finally, we have a bush variety, which removes all the ferns and replaces them with bushes completely. There's a lot of different bushes there. There's cowberries, bearberries, arrowwood, and I believe some brambles. I think that's some brambles over there. And this is what it looks like. Forgot it's a forest, so you can't just drop in there. Let me find this spot real quick. There we go. This is what it looks like in first person mode. And of course this is very dense, but the idea is that you would use this brush here to make it slightly less dense depending on what you want, whereas this is just there in case you want to really dense up 1 or 2 areas in the forest. The next line, like I said, is the shrub variety, which is the same thing, it just paints a little bit different. It's lacking the ground texture and doesn't build up to it. So, the exact same stuff. Next we have the outskirt varieties, which are the same thing, but lacking all the tall trees. And this is what it looks like. I thought it's pretty nice, so I might as well include it as a separate brush. And again, you have the mixed variety, the open variety, the fern-only variety, and the bush-only variety. And finally, the shrub section, which is basically just the ground coverage from the forest. So you have the mixed variety, the fern variety, which you can really see the difference there, all the little bushes, which does make quite a difference when you're removing them. And then the bush-only version. And of course you can mix and match them if you like. And you can make a forest a lot less dense by using this. So for example, you can paint a light variety forest, like so, and then use these shrubs to make the trees a lot less dense while keeping the ground just as dense as it was. Or you can use these outskirts to make it a lot less dense. And that way you keep the sort of sapling-like trees and the non-redwood trees, but you remove the redwoods. You make a better example here. So with that, you can create a sort of clearing where a lot of smaller trees grow, but not the redwoods themselves. And the way these brushes were designed was to make little patterns that naturally make the forest feel more alive and full intensity. So you can see there's bits missing there, but it's quite thick here. Likewise, the ferns have little bits missing here and there, and it sort of snakes around, same with the overall trees. And the same thing can be seen with bushes, but just to a lesser extent because, well, they're a bit thicker, so it's harder to see the gaps. But they are still there. And I really think this looks a lot more natural than just having 100% intensity trees throughout. So with all that covered, let's take a look at the config file, which is found just inside the mod folder. And you don't need any special tools to modify these, by the way, just double click them and edit them in Notepad. One very important thing before we get started. The maps in this game are built when you load the game. So for any of these changes to take effect, you need to change something in the file, save the file, and then exit the game and start the game up again. First of all, you can enable or disable the mod. This doesn't uninstall it, but it's a good way to quickly enable or disable these brushes from appearing without having to move the mod folder around. Then you have Dirt Forest Ground enabled, which is either true or false. Same for the above, by the way. And this just enables or disables this new texture for being used for forest rather than the vanilla texture. Of course, if you have it set to false, all forests in the game will just use the vanilla textures rather than this new brown texture. Next we have the grass level. So I've got it set to 2 right now, which means every biome has its own grass. What this means is, you can see the grass by default is the taiga grass, because this is the taiga biome. And then if you paint, say, tropical stuff, we get tropical grass. That's not this tall grass, by the way, that's a shrub. It's this small colored grass here. Likewise, if you paint temperate grass, you'll see it's a little bit different still. It's smaller, and the color is slightly less intense than the tropical grass. And that's great for visuals, but if you paint at maximum radius and paint very quickly and sort of wave the mouse a lot, you'll see it's stuttering quite badly. It's not as bad if you paint locally, or if you move just slightly, but if you really move your mouse all over the place, you will get pretty big stutters. And that's because the game is very bad at indexing individual grass types. If you set this to 0, every brush will use the default grass on the map. So for example, on this map, it would be this grey grass here, or this brown grass here. So that means if I paint some tropical grass, it wouldn't be this green grass, it would be this brown grass here. If I paint this sort of grassy tropical forest, it would also come with brown grass, not with green grass. Now the big tall tufts of grass, they would stay because, again, they're not a grass, they are a type of shrub, it just looks like a grass, but the tiny grass at the bottom would be brown. And this also counts for no grasses, by the way, so if you use this brush, you'll see it comes with no grass. If you have this setting set to 0, and you reload the game, I didn't reload, so you can't see it here, this brush would also come with brown grass. Because again, it needs to index grasses to have individual grasses, including the ability to have no grass at all. And the last option is to set it to 1, which means you define the grass that each map uses down here. Right now, set to 0, it uses the map default, which is the same as setting this to 0. But if you set this to 1, this enables this variable, and now you can set it to, say, tropical. So if you set it to 1, see 1 is tropical, now every map in the game will use tropical grass. If you set it to biosyn, which is 6, this is set to 6, every map in the game will use biosyn grass now. But again, grass type is only ever used if grass level is set to 1, because that is the custom preset. So this is what allows you to set the grass yourself. If you set it to 0, that uses the default grass on each map, and if you set it to 2, that uses the individual grasses that I've assigned to each biome brush, which means this doesn't get used. So these are the settings I'd recommend. Grass level to 2, so that you can have individual grass types for each brush, and allow the new texture to be used. But of course, you can customize it however you like. Now if you saw the last showcase, you'll notice that the one thing missing from this is being able to set whether each brush is a canopy brush or a shrub brush. The difference being that a canopy brush paints shrubs first and then layers them into forest in the middle. So you can see that the shrubs are building on the outside and in the middle has a forest in it. and I think it looks a lot nicer, but it does come with this sort of texture in the middle, which I think is better now that I changed it, but it's still a different texture. It doesn't work for this brush, for example. Whereas a shrub variety of that brush, as you can see here, doesn't have that build-up. Trees just spawn everywhere. But it doesn't come with that texture in the middle. See, this one has the brown texture. This is the forest texture, by the way. And this does not have that texture. This is just the shrub texture. I'm using the words canopy and forest interchangeably. I'm sorry if that's a little bit confusing, but this is the canopy texture, which is sort of where the canopy, that being the forest, spawns. Whereas this is another variety I made where the trees are counted as shrubs, not as canopy, not as forest, which means they can spawn anywhere, and you don't need to spawn the big texture in the middle. And originally, you were meant to be able to choose whether each brush is a canopy or a shrub brush in this config file. However, I found that to do this, I would need to add about 3 or 4 times as many indexed layers to the game. Now that doesn't ruin performance, but it does ruin quality. You see, the more index layers you have, the quicker levels of detail jump in. That means that at, say, 60 layers, I can spawn, I don't know, 200 dinosaurs, and it'll be at high quality, and then the next dinosaur will make all the others drop in quality level. Whereas with 200 layers, I could spawn, I don't know, like 80 dinosaurs, and then they'd start dropping down in quality level. They should, I think, still be maximum quality when you're very close to them. So if I spawn this, I think that's what it normally looks like. But the more layers you have, the sort of lower the radius you have to be away from it before it drops in quality level. In short, the game can only handle so much complexity on the screen at a time, and those index layers existing alone adds to that complexity. So the more layers you have, the closer you need to be to a dinosaur in order to see it at its maximum quality. And of course, the more dinosaurs you spawn, the more that's impacted as well. So, while letting you choose whether each brush is a canopy or a shrub brush in the config file would be very nice, I felt that it would compromise the quality of the game way too much to give you that ability, because again, it would drop the quality of a lot of things in the game. So this is the compromise. And there's one more thing to cover, and that is, on the last showcase, a lot of people asked whether the stuttering that comes from indexing grasses is permanent or only during painting. So I thought I'd show you. If I paint normally while moving, this is how much stuttering you get. This is if I hold down shift, so it paints a lot more. This is if I hold down shift while moving the mouse wildly. You see it stutters way more now. And now, this is it. After I've painted, when I'm no longer painting. So it only stutters while you're painting, not afterwards. Aside from if you have a lot of tree spawned and your graphics card just can't handle that, which is separate to the paintbrushes, that's just a performance issue at that point. But yeah, the stuttering only happens while painting. See, this is fine, and this is not. And that, I believe, is everything. That's all the new brushes, the new texture you can optionally enable or disable, and the ability to remove stuff with any brush using the new version of Expanded Terrain tools. Thank you very much, and I hope you enjoyed.